I believe we can't do a workshop on how to work smarter, not harder, without bringing up the topic of assertive communication. And more to the point, the ability to say no. In our do more with less society, the nice guy or gal, you know, the ones that never speak up for themselves, always say yes, and usually end up feeling overwhelmed and frustrated because they get dumped on a lot, well, they tend to end up last. And in this current work culture, it almost seems ridiculous to even entertain the thought of saying no. What with few job opportunities that are available and a lineup of people just waiting for that opportunity. But what happens if you don't say no sometimes? If you're drowning in busyness and having trouble keeping up to the point where it's wearing you down, these are signs that you are overextending yourself. At the beginning of this workshop, we talked a bit about stress in the workplace and how being stressed has a negative impact on your productivity. Assertiveness is a communication skill that allows you to communicate what you need and sometimes say no to things. But there's an art to it because, like many things in life, too much of one thing is not good for another. If you reference the diagram that's in your workbook on page 34, you can see there's a balance of sorts to this. Because if you're passive, others are given priority over you. But if you're aggressive, then it's all about you and your rights with no concern for others. Assertive is a more balanced approach. Now, the word assertive may come off as sounding cold and harsh to you, but when you look at its true intent, you can see that it really is about respecting not only others' needs, but also your own. In this way, both parties come out of the conversation feeling heard and acknowledged. So, just to dispel a few myths about assertiveness, it is not the same as being aggressive. The chart clearly defines the difference between the two. It doesn't mean you'll always get what you want, but at least you will have expressed yourself and communicated your needs with the intention of coming to a mutually satisfactory compromise. And you don't have to be assertive in every situation. This simply provides you with tools that allow you the choice of when to be assertive. If the thought of being assertive is something that you struggle with, it can feel like a hard thing to do. It requires you to be honest with yourself and then expressing it in an appropriate, respectful, but direct way. Translation: no beating around the bush. Being assertive clearly leaves less room for misunderstanding and miscommunication. This streamlines the communication process. There's more information in an article on your webpage, and I can really only touch on the topic here as there's a whole lot more to it than I can cover in a short amount of time. So be sure to take some time and read it. So that's a bit of an intro to assertive communication. And did you notice that I snuck in there the ability to say no early on in this topic? I do want to talk a little bit about that nasty little two-letter word and its impact on your productivity. Just to be clear, when I'm saying say no, I'm not being literal about it. There are many ways to say no without actually even using the word. So for this conversation, just keep that in mind that when I say no, it's not meant in the literal way. Although there may be times when you do need to just say no and mean it. It's probably safe to say that most everyone wants to be liked. Yeah, sure, I'll help you. No problem. I can do that for you. But being too nice isn't good for you, your health, or your productivity. So, do you often say yes when you really want or should say no? The urge to say yes is doing a number on your productivity. And to give you a few examples of others that echo this fact, Grammarly states that overworking significantly reduces productivity. So you can be a productivity machine, but if you have too much to do, you'll end up overwhelmed and exhausted, and you can't sustain that level of work over the long haul. Eventually, you'll start to drop things, miss details, and lose momentum. Lifehack says that saying yes to unreasonably urgent, unimportant, or any extra work is a productivity killer. And productivity flourishing says one of the most common productivity mistakes is saying yes to requests that you have no room for in your schedule. Now, there are many reasons why we're inclined to say yes, sometimes to the point of exhaustion, overcommitment, and ultimately being unproductive. Here's just 3 of those reasons. Number 1, you're afraid of disappointing, hurting, or ending up in conflict with others. This may be the most common reason. So, because you want to avoid feeling discomfort from saying no, you agree to take on a new workload, even though you know you don't have the capacity for it. Number 2, you don't understand the true cost of saying yes. Every yes means time, plus you're expending energy, attention, and sanity, things that can't always be easily replenished when you're stretched too thin. In the video, Multiply Your Time, you heard Rory tell us that every time you say yes to one thing, you're simultaneously saying no to an infinite number of other things. And some of those things are important, but they're not getting the attention they deserve because you have very little energy and time to attend to them. And number 3, you undervalue your current workload. Despite all the signs that your workload is full, another innate tendency kicks in, and it's called optimism. Optimism leads you to believe that adding one more thing to your already overloaded workload won't necessarily lead you to falling behind in your work or becoming overwhelmed. So you really need to watch this one for sure. I think the best tip that I can give you in terms of how to determine whether you should say yes to something is to create a criterion, as in high priority, high impact. If the extra task you're thinking about taking on doesn't mean those 2 criteria, it's probably best to say no to them. As human beings, all of our emotions flow from either fear or love. Guess which emotion is causing you troubles with no? Fear, of course. So it's important to fully understand the implications of saying yes to things, which will help you shift your mindset from the fear of saying no. And lastly, I think it's important that we look at 3 common myths about saying no. So, number 1, saying no is a career killer. The true career killers are beyond any one transactional no. There are your skills, the economy, globalization, just to name a few. There are many factors that will kill a career. I'm not suggesting that you say no all the time. You need to assess realistically what you can and cannot do before you choose to say no to someone or something. Number 2, saying yes, even when we know it's silly and dysfunctional, is part of the game. Say yes sometimes for relationships that are worth it. But for career progression, that quid pro quo disappeared years ago. Your boss and teammates' jobs are in just as much jeopardy as yours. Many of your yeses benefit only them. And number 3, my boss will never accept no. I'm in a no-win situation. Not every situation can be a win-win, but most every relationship can be. So instead of saying no and worrying that you'll get a reputation for being an uncooperative naysayer, or worse yet, get fired, tell your boss what you can do. Give alternatives, or delay your response rather than react in the moment. Give yourself some space and time so that you can formulate an informed decision and response. There's one last exercise and discussion forum for you to complete on this course. On page 35, there's some questions for you to consider, and is followed by 3 reflective questions. So number 1, what if anything is your learning coming from this topic? So is there anything that resonated with you, or did something spark a thought? Who or what are you willing to say no to? Be sure to pick one thing or person that you're willing to just stretch yourself a little bit and say no to. It doesn't mean you will, but at least you're putting it on the radar. And how will you and or others benefit as a result of you saying no to this thing or this person? So for example, if I stop agreeing to help out on every committee, I'll have more time with my family, which they would appreciate. Plus, it'll give me more time to do more of what I really want to do. If you have a tendency to say yes or have difficulty saying no, this is a great exercise for you. So be sure to spend a bit of time on this. When you're done that, then go to the discussion forum and post your comments or your thoughts using the prompts that are there. Honestly, what this all boils down to is creating some balance. And the only way to balance your time, energy, attention, and sanity is to carefully assess all your priorities and make better decisions regarding what to add to your workload. On page 36, I've given you some guidelines for saying no, along with a few sample scripts to use as a reference to help you become a no master. And this completes the course. Next is the wrap up call where we will make things happen. So I hope you can join me on the call.